Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to show you how I made Zero's Z-Saber. So without further ado, let's get into it. The electrical components, parts list, and instructions all came from the Adafruit website with just a few changes in the code to suit this particular saber, but I will touch on those as I go. Right here is pretty much everything you need. You have your battery, your switch, momentary switch, you have your board, headers, speaker, and LED wires. So everything's pretty much there, minus a few connecting wires. To combine my boards, I soldered a set of headers in between the two. Here I installed the on and off switch and plugged in the speaker. With that done, I soldered up a connector for the LEDs and plugged it in. Following that, I installed the battery. All of these connections have their own spot on the board, so you can't get them crossed. For the body of the saber, I'm using a 1.5-inch PVC tube, a reducer, a coupling, and finally a test cap. I ended up not using the dome cap over on the left. I used my heat gun to soften up the PVC pipe to squeeze the reducer inside. Once that pipe is heated up, the reducer slides right in. I had the idea of using set screws to secure the blade in place, so I marked out the spots that I'm going to drill. After drilling the holes, I used my threading tool to obviously put threads into the pipe. And after that, I installed my set screws. I made a ring of 10mm HD foam that'll go around the top of the hilt and just made a cap to that so that'll complete the overall top construction of the hilt. Once that was done, I brought it over to the belt sander to put a bevel into it. To make the pommel, I cut out a strip of 6mm HD foam and slid the coupling into that. I cut a piece of scrap PVC and used my heat gun to soften it up. Once that was done, I pressed it inside of that existing PVC pipe to get a more dramatic curve out of it. After shaping it, I drilled out a hole for magnets to be installed later. Circling back to the hilt, I used my bandsaw to cut out a section that I'll have my electronics rest in. I'm going to wrap the hilt in 2mm foam. Before I did draw on my grips. I went back over those lines with my wood burner to burn that pattern into the foam, and shortly after that, I cut it out. I applied contact cement on both the foam and the PVC pipe and carefully rolled them together and cut off the excess. I cut into the foam to free the cut portion that I removed on my bandsaw earlier. This is what I was going for, a removable back to get into the electronics. I rolled up some foam clay into little balls to make the decorative dome pieces on the top of the hilt. I used more foam clay to make the diamond at the bottom of the pommel. I also drilled holes at the bottom so the sounds from the speaker can flow through easier. I drilled holes for the momentary and on and off switch. After letting the foam balls dry over a couple days, I cut them in half and glued them on. I used a file to clean up the hole for the on and off switch. With everything done, I applied 3 layers of plastic dip to everything. With my airbrush, I sprayed on 3 full layers of gold paint onto the hilt, as well as the removable top. The pommel got 3 layers of silver. I used epoxy to glue on the magnets on the back plate. which will connect to that scrap piece I drilled into earlier. This will hold another set of magnets so they can clip on together. I glued a strip of 6mm foam on the back like this so it can secure its set of magnets. Once that strip is glued on, this is how everything is meant to kind of function. Once that receiving piece was done, I inserted it into the hilt like this and used epoxy to secure it in place. This is basically what I was going for. With everything done, I did a quick assembly check to see how my progress was going and if I really liked the end result. With everything looking good, now it's time to move on to the electronics. These are the lightsaber sound files that you get from Adafruit, but I changed the hit and swing animation sounds to Zero's Z-Saber sounds from Mega Man X4. I uploaded the code and did a final test before installing everything. I went back to check the code to figure out why the LEDs weren't traveling the full length, and it turned out it was because the number of pixels was rated for 114 and I needed to bump that up to 144. With everything done, I pulled the wires through and started soldering up my switches. I soldered up the momentary switch and pressed it in place. I used a sheet of acrylic for everything to rest on and used zip ties to secure everything together. This assembly is friction fit, so I didn't have to use anything else to secure it in place. I cut out a thin strip of coroplast that the LEDs will rest on. I soldered a set of LEDs and taped them on each side of the coroplast. I then wrapped the LEDs in the cellophane that came with the lightsaber blade that I ordered from ultrasabers.com. I slid the blade into the hilt and plugged the LEDs into the board. I cut a slit into the test cap to guide the wires from the speaker through. I used a bit of hot glue to secure the speaker onto that cap. With the electronics all done and the wires all tucked away, I could reinstall my back plate and finish the assembly for the Z-Saber. To wrap up my assembly, I finally glued on the diamond. Just like everything else in the armor, I applied my shoe polish to dirty it up and used a damp paper towel to kind of dab it. To finish it all off, I used my silver rubbing buff to add scratches here and there where I thought it belonged, and applied a layer of clear coat to seal it all in.
Nice. Nice. Nice.
This is the coolest thing I ever made. If I ever need to adjust the sound or get to the compartment, remove the cap, and thanks to those magnets I put in, lift this up, boop, that comes right off, boom, electronics. And I can adjust the sound right in here, boop, beep, boop, boop, boop. Or if I need to get into anything, I can pull off this cap, pull everything out if I need to, boom. I want to thank you all for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. And until then, y'all take care.